The recordings still exist. 3 emergency calls, 3 missing people, and 3 investigations that ended without answers. The first caller reported an intruder. The second claimed he was being followed. The third knew things he should never have known. None of them were ever seen again. The first call came from a suburban home outside Portland. At 2:14 in the morning, a man contacted emergency services and quietly asked for help. According to him, someone was inside the house. The dispatcher asked where he was hiding. The caller answered, "In the bedroom." The dispatcher instructed him to lock the door. A few seconds passed. Then the caller said something strange. "The bedroom door is open." The dispatcher asked if he could see the intruder. The caller replied, "No." Another pause followed. Then, "He's standing in the hallway?" Police were dispatched immediately. The caller continued whispering updates. Each one sounded more confused than the last. The figure wasn't moving. It wasn't speaking. It was simply standing there, watching. The dispatcher asked what the person looked like. The answer arrived instantly. "He looks exactly like me." The dispatcher thought she had misheard him. The caller repeated himself. "He looks exactly like me." For several seconds, neither person spoke. Then the caller quietly added, "He's holding the phone." The line disconnected. Officers arrived less than 4 minutes later. The house was empty. No intruder. No caller. Nothing. Investigators later discovered something even stranger. The emergency call had originated from the home's landline, but the homeowner was over 200 miles away. Security footage placed him inside a hotel throughout the entire night. He never returned home, and he was never seen again. The recording was archived. The investigation stalled, and eventually the case faded from public attention. But it wasn't the last emergency call that ended with a disappearance. Years later, another dispatcher would answer a call that sounded impossible for an entirely different reason. The second call was received on a highway outside Albuquerque. It was 11:43 p.m. A man contacted emergency services and reported that someone was following him. He sounded frightened. Wind could be heard through the phone. The dispatcher asked for his location. The caller described a deserted stretch of road surrounded by open desert. He said another vehicle had been behind him for nearly 30 minutes. Every time he accelerated, the vehicle accelerated. Every time he slowed down, it slowed down. The dispatcher instructed him to drive toward a populated area. The caller agreed. Then he suddenly stopped talking. For several seconds, only road noise could be heard. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. The fear was gone. Now he sounded confused. According to the recording, he said, "It passed me." The dispatcher asked what had happened. The caller replied, "It shouldn't have been able to pass me." The dispatcher asked why. His answer was short. "There's no driver." The next few seconds were difficult to understand. The caller began breathing heavily. Then he laughed. Not because something was funny, because he sounded terrified. He repeatedly stated that the vehicle had no driver. Then he said something investigators would later replay hundreds of times. "It's slowing down." The dispatcher asked if the vehicle was stopping. The caller answered, "No, it's waiting." The dispatcher asked what he meant. The caller never answered. Instead, the sound of his engine suddenly became louder. Then came what investigators believed was the sound of hard braking. The caller shouted something unintelligible. The line filled with static. And then the call ended. Officers arrived in the area less than 10 minutes later. They found the caller's vehicle parked on the shoulder of the road. The engine was still running. The headlights were still on. The driver's phone remained inside. The driver's seat was empty. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No footprints leading into the desert. Search teams combed the surrounding area for days. Nothing was found. No trace of the missing man has ever been discovered. To this day, nobody knows why the vehicle was abandoned, and nobody ever identified the car he claimed had been following him. The missing driver was never found. Neither was the vehicle he claimed had been following him. The case remains unresolved. But compared to the final call on this list, it almost sounds ordinary. The third call is considered by many investigators to be the strangest. It began like countless other emergency calls. A dispatcher answered. A man quietly asked for help. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The caller claimed somebody was outside his apartment. The dispatcher requested his address. Instead of answering, the caller asked a question. "What time does your shift end tonight?" The dispatcher ignored it. She asked for the address again. The caller repeated the question. The dispatcher refused to answer. For several seconds, neither person spoke. Then the caller calmly said her name. The dispatcher froze. Emergency operators do not normally provide their names at the beginning of calls. Yet the caller had spoken it correctly. Investigators later confirmed there had been no introduction. The dispatcher demanded to know how he knew her name. The caller ignored the question. Instead, he began describing details about her. Her age, her hair color, the make of her car. The dispatcher immediately signaled for a supervisor. By this point, the call was being monitored by multiple employees. Everyone listening heard the same thing. The caller knew information he should not have known. Then he said something even stranger. He described the apartment building where the dispatcher lived, not the building from which he claimed to be calling. Her building. He correctly described the front entrance, the hallway, even the number painted on her apartment door. At that point, police attempted to trace the call. The result only created more confusion. The call appeared to originate from an abandoned payphone nearly 15 miles away. Officers were dispatched immediately. Meanwhile, the dispatcher continued speaking with the caller. For the first time, she sounded frightened. The caller remained calm, almost polite. Then he said, "Don't worry, I'm not outside your apartment." The dispatcher asked what he meant. The answer came instantly. "I'm already inside." The line disconnected. Police reached the payphone minutes later. Nobody was there. Security cameras covering nearby businesses showed no activity. No person approached the phone. No person left the phone. Nothing. Investigators later examined the area frame by frame. The payphone appeared untouched throughout the entire period during which the call occurred.
The dispatcher eventually left her position.
According to former colleagues, she never fully recovered from the incident. No suspect was ever identified. No arrest was ever made. And no explanation was ever accepted. The recordings from all 3 calls still exist. Each was investigated. Each generated theories. And each left behind the same problem. The calls were real. The recordings were real. The people involved were real. Yet the most important details refused to fit together. A man called from a house he wasn't in. A driver disappeared from a running vehicle. And a caller knew things he should never have known. The calls ended. The investigations ended. The questions never did.